There comes a moment, a quiet, suffocating moment when you look around and realize they're gone, not just physically absent, but emotionally, spiritually, soulfully missing. When you needed a voice, they offered silence. When your heart was bleeding, they turned their faces to the sun, pretending they couldn't see the storm in your eyes. And you ask yourself why. Why did they walk away when the weight was crushing you? Why did they disappear when your hands trembled for help? It wasn't a coincidence. It was clarity. The truth is, some people were never built to stay not in the fire, not in the dark, not in the places where love requires endurance. They were there for your rise, never your fall, but now begins the part they were never meant to witness your resurrection. The pain of silence in the hour of collapse. There is a specific kind of pain that doesn't scream, it echoes. It doesn't cut you quickly, it bleeds you slowly, and it comes when the people you trusted the most vanish into silence, right when your world is falling apart. You sit there, surrounded by the debris of everything you thought was secure, and you reach out not for miracles, just for presence. A word, a hand, a sign that someone cares. But what greets you is not concern, not loyalty, not the sound of footsteps running toward you. What greets you is silence, cold, hollow, echoing silence, the kind that makes you question not just others, but yourself. Was I not worth staying for? Did I matter so little? But the truth is deeper. They heard your collapse. They saw the storm. They felt the tremble in your voice. They just chose to pretend it wasn't happening because facing your pain would require them to look into parts of themselves they've spent a lifetime avoiding. So instead of stepping in, they stepped out. And that exit? It wasn't an accident. It was a message. A revelation that some people were only committed to the version of you that had it all together. The cheerful one, the strong one, the provider, the protector, the one who made them feel better about their own empty spaces. But the moment you became human, cracked, vulnerable, afraid they no longer saw value, and so they let you drown without ever reaching for a rope. The silence in that moment doesn't just hurt. It changes you. It matures you in ways no book ever could. It teaches you that not all love is loyal, that not every friend will walk into the dark with you. And as painful as it is, you begin to understand. Some people were only using your light to avoid their own shadows. Your fall exposed their foundation, and it was made of sand, but take heart. The silence was their confession. Their absence was their truth. And in that lonely hour you found something stronger than sympathy, clarity. Because when the noise fades, when the fake concern stops, and when the phone doesn't ring, that's when your spirit learns to rise without applause. That's when your soul is introduced to a strength you didn't know lived inside you. So don't mourn the ones who left. They didn't fail you, they revealed themselves, and in doing so, they gifted you something rare, the ability to never need them again. Comfort is a privilege they reserve for themselves. It's a hard lesson, one you learn not from books, but from heartbreak, that some people only know how to receive comfort, not give it. They will gladly drink from the well of your empathy, your strength, your time, your love. But the moment your cup runs dry, they vanish. You see, your presence was a sanctuary for them. Your strength made them feel safe. Your resilience gave them something to lean on. They fed off your ability to carry weight, to listen without judgment, to hold space for their chaos. But the moment life flipped the script and you needed shelter, they became suddenly unavailable. Not because they didn't care, but because care was never something they planned to reciprocate. To them, comfort was a one-way street, a luxury they deserved, not something to extend. And when your soul cried out for what you once gave so freely, all you received was deflection, excuses, silence. That's when it hits you. They were never emotionally invested in you, just in how you made them feel. They loved your strength because it served their comfort, not your connection. And when you needed to lean, when you needed even a fraction of what you gave, they saw it as weakness, as inconvenience. So they withdrew, quietly, casually, like your pain was something embarrassing. But let this truth settle deep. Their reaction had nothing to do with your worth. It was never your fault. It's just that some people don't know how to stand beside someone who's no longer shining. They associate love with benefit, not with burden. And when your life became heavy, they simply didn't have the courage to lift. The absence wasn't random, it was revealing. It showed you who sees comfort as a transaction and who offers it as a gift. And yes, it hurts. It hurts when the ones you covered don't cover you, when the people who clung to your light leave you alone in the dark. But in that darkness, something powerful awakens self-preservation. You begin to rebuild, not to impress, but to protect. You become more selective, not bitter. You no longer hand out pieces of yourself to people who only show up when it's sunny. And slowly, you stop chasing comfort in others and begin creating it within yourself. That's the turning point, that's the rise, because from now on you will not beg to be seen. You will not explain why you're hurting. You will not apologize for needing what you once gave without question. You've learned, you've healed, and most importantly you've remembered who you are without their validation. And that memory is your power. You were a mirror they couldn't face sometimes. People don't leave because you failed them, they leave because you exposed them. Your pain didn't push them away. It reflected something they couldn't handle. When you broke, it reminded them of how breakable they are. When you cried, it echoed the emotions they've spent years suppressing. And when you needed someone to simply sit beside your sorrow, they couldn't, because being close to your vulnerability forced them to confront their own. You became a mirror not of who they were pretending to be, but of who they really are underneath all their armor. That's why they pulled back. That's why they looked the other way. Not because your struggle was too much, but because your truth was too honest. And honesty is terrifying to those who live behind masks. You see, people like that are comfortable with shallow waters. They enjoy surface-level connection, distraction, validation. But when the soul gets involved, when wounds rise to the surface, when authenticity becomes the language they freeze. Because it's no longer about convenience, it's about courage. And courage is something they only admire from afar. So when you shattered in front of them, when your silence turned to sobs, when your strength gave way to weariness, they didn't just lose interest. They lost the ability to pretend. And that scared them. You were no longer the polished version they liked, you became the unfiltered truth they couldn't stand. Because deep down, your vulnerability touched the parts of them they've never healed. Your breakdown made their emotional neglect visible. Your openness made their emotional absence undeniable. And instead of rising to meet you, they ran, not because you were weak, but because they were unprepared to be real. It's easier for them to label you as too emotional, too much, or too intense, than to admit they lack the capacity for intimacy. It's easier to walk away than to grow up. And so they leave quietly, defensively, often with some twisted narrative that paints you as the problem. But don't let that confuse you. Their absence is not a reflection of your worth, it's a reflection of their fear. They couldn't stand the reflection you showed them, not because it was distorted, but because it was clear. So clear that it demanded change, and change is something many would rather avoid than embrace. But don't curse the mirror. Don't regret the clarity. Let it refine you. Let it remind you that your depth is not a weakness, it's a filter. A divine filter that removes what can't grow with you. You were never asking for too much. You were simply asking for someone real, and real scares the ones still hiding. Let them go. Let the mirror stand. You were always the truth in a world addicted to illusions. You were meant to rise without them. It wasn't abandonment. It was a release. A divine subtraction that you mistook for betrayal because you were still trying to hold on to what life was trying to remove. When they left, it didn't make sense. You gave them loyalty. You gave them your time, your love, your fight, your best intentions. And yet, When the shadows crept in and you needed someone to simply stay, they vanished like smoke in the wind. At first you tried to understand it, tried to blame yourself. Was I too much? Did I say the wrong thing? Was my pain too heavy? But with time came truth. They weren't meant to walk with you through the fire because the fire wasn't meant to burn you. It was meant to burn them off. Sometimes the storm doesn't come to destroy you. It comes to reveal who can't withstand the weather you were built to survive. You thought their presence was a part of your destiny, but it was only a chapter, not the whole book. They served their purpose. They taught you who not to become, what not to tolerate, and what it feels like when comfort chooses convenience over commitment. And as painful as their absence was, it became the soil where your strength began to grow. You were meant to rise without them, to discover a version of yourself that doesn't wait for validation, that doesn't need applause, that doesn't seek approval from hands that once dropped you. You see, the journey you're on now, it required separation, it required silence, it required you to be emptied so you could be filled with something stronger: self-respect, purpose, resilience. And no, it doesn't feel like a gift when it first happens. It feels like rejection, like loss, like betrayal. But later, in the quiet of your healing, you begin to see it for what it truly was: redirection. They couldn't stay, not because you were unworthy, but because your path demanded more than they were willing to give. Your calling required people who wouldn't flinch at your wounds or run from your shadows. So they were removed, not out of punishment, but preparation. You had to walk alone so you could finally hear your own voice, so you could finally meet the version of yourself that doesn't settle, that doesn't chase, that doesn't beg anyone to stay. You were never left behind. You were lifted ahead. They exited so your next chapter could begin clean, bold and undiluted. And now, when you rise, and you will rise, you'll do it with new eyes, new strength, and a new understanding. Not everyone was meant to go where you're headed. And that's not your burden, that's your blessing.